February 23rd, 2026, Fairfax County, Virginia. It is 5 in the morning and it has been snowing when a young police officer, merely 2.5 years on the force, is walking toward an apartment building in the suburbs. Dispatch 911 has told him almost nothing: domestic assault and 2 victims. He has handled these calls before. You show up, you separate the parties, you take statements, you file a report. Most of the time, the situation is already cool by the time you arrive. Most of the time, nobody is actively dying when you open the door. But this wasn't most of the time. What this officer is about to walk into, what his body cam is about to record, is a scene that the Fairfax County Police Chief will later describe as, quote, beyond imagination. A scene he will call a bloodbath. A scene involving a family that came to America from Nepal looking for a better life and found something no one could have predicted on a quiet suburban street in Virginia. This is the story of the Thapa family.
Come here, come up.
Oh shit. Straighten out the door. Ma'am, can you come up here?
Ma'am, are you able to come upstairs?
Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest stories from around South Asia. I'm your host Aryan.
And I'm Aishwarya.
The case that I have for you today just happens to be one of those cases where it just so happens that there is footage of the crime caught live, and it is footage that still gives me shivers. Aishwarya, you haven't seen the footage, and our viewers will get glimpses of it, some redacted, some unredacted, through the course of this episode, but you haven't seen it, and I would like for you to see it before I dive into the story.
Yeah, I think before we discuss anything else, let's begin there.
I hear a kid screaming inside.
Hi, ma'am, can you...
Fairfax County Police, open the door! Hey, put the knife down! Drop the knife! Do it now!
I don't know, oh my God. I mean, when it begins, it almost looks like a video game footage.
Yeah.
And then immediately the sounds start coming. And then you notice the blood in the hallway on the doors.
Aishwarya, having access to this footage just makes me think of the hundreds of cases we have covered for which we don't have the footage of the POV of the police officers that walk into these nightmarish scenarios,
right,
and how they have to react. This case, this video really stuck with me. And I'm going to take you guys straight to that night when that body cam began recording its footage. It is still dark when the standard police-issued cruiser pulls up to the Margate Manor Apartments in Mantua, a quiet residential pocket of Fairfax County about 20 miles west of Washington, D.C. The ground is blanketed in fresh snow, and at 5 a.m. in late February, the apartment complex carries the particular stillness of a place where everyone is still asleep. The only sounds are the crunch of boots on icy pavement and the low idle of the engine behind them. Officer Nicholas Brazones and his partner step out and begin walking toward the building. The 911 dispatch call told them that there was domestic assault occurring involving apparently 2 victims.
My husband was looking at the door, but there's someone banging on the door who's bleeding a lot with the finger a little bit. I can't move the finger of the door, and she's start banging on our door. I wanted to run in, but my husband won't run in. Okay.
It is, on the face of it, the kind of call that could mean anything from a shouting match to maybe something worse. As they approach the building, they hear a woman screaming. It is coming from somewhere near the ground floor apartments, and it is the kind of sound that recalibrates everything you thought you were walking into. Not raised voices, not an argument spilling into a hallway. This is a shriek that carries the weight of something catastrophic, the sound a human being makes when they are watching their world end in real time. The officers naturally quicken their pace, and you can see this captured in the body cam footage. Near the entrance to one of the apartments, they find a young woman. She is in her early 30s, collapsed near the doorway, blood visible on her clothing, screaming for help. She has stab wounds. The officers do not yet know her name. They do not yet know that she is a licensed practical nurse, that she is a mother to a 1-year-old boy, that less than 10 minutes ago she was asleep in her own bed in an apartment she shared with her husband, her parents, and her infant son. They do not yet know that the person who did this to her is still inside. They do not yet know that this was her own father. But what they do know is that somehow she managed, despite her injuries, to get out of the apartment and cross the hallway to a neighbor's door. Her name is Mamta Thapa, and she is 33 years old. And with whatever strength she has left, she banged on the door of Ariana Edelman's apartment so hard that Edelman woke up thinking someone was trying to break in. Edelman, who has young children herself, wanted to open the door, wanted to help, but her husband told her not to. Quote, "We have kids, and you don't know if it's a crazy person," he said. Aishwarya, my gut says I wish they helped the family. But I think my reaction might have been similar too, where I would have been scared for my own children's safety.
100%. I also think we all, a lot of us, most of us, have the goodness in us where if given enough time, we will open that door. If we can ask a couple more questions, if we can, see this person just a little longer, be normal, be scared, not act like a crazy person. Maybe eventually we all would, but by that time it's all done. What you need to do is react in that really quick split second. And usually in that split second, the response is to protect your home, your kids, your family, And I think that's really sad, but that's just how it happens.
What Ariana Edelman and her husband saw was a bloody woman banging their door. Whether or not they thought they were safe, what they did do was call 911. When she looked through the peephole, she could not see anyone because Mamta had already fallen to the ground, but she could still hear the banging, weaker now, from somewhere below the peephole's line of sight. The officers approach the apartment door, and the first thing they see is blood smeared across it. What happened inside this apartment began with a violence so immediate that it left its marks on the surfaces of the building before anyone arrived to intervene. Brazones reaches for the door handle, and what happens in the next 30 seconds will be captured on his body cam and later described by the Fairfax County Police Chief as unimaginable.
Hey, put the knife down! Drop the knife! Do it now! Drop the knife!
The frame is unsteady, the lighting dim, and the apartment opens directly into a small living area. What the camera registers in the first fraction of a second is a man kneeling on the floor, hunched over the body of another man with a blade in his right hand. The blade is 12 inches of curved steel, a dao, the traditional Nepali chopping knife that rural families use for butchering meat and splitting bone. In the right context, in a kitchen in Nepal, it is a household tool. In this apartment, at this hour, covered in what it is covered in, it is a weapon that has already done catastrophic damage. The man kneeling is Chhatra Bahadur Thapa, 54 years old and a recent immigrant from Nepal who received his green cards barely 3 months ago. The man beneath him, slick with blood and barely moving, is his son-in-law Santosh Kumar, 35 years old, who had been outside scraping snow off the car when the screaming started and made the decision to go back inside instead of staying where he was safe. Between the officer standing at the threshold and Thapa crouched over his son-in-law, the released footage is deliberately blurred. Fairfax County Police applied the blur before making the video public because what it conceals is a 1-year-old baby lying on the floor and the body of Binda Thapa, Chhatra's wife who's 52 years old herself, who has already been fatally stabbed and is lying motionless between the baby and her husband. The officers do not hesitate.
Drop the knife! Do it now!
The command comes immediately, sharp and loud, the product of training that kicks in faster than thought in moments like this. They repeat it at least 2, maybe 3 times, each repetition louder and more urgent than the last. Chhatra Thapa does not drop the knife. He does not raise his hands. He does not acknowledge the officer's presence with the posture of a man who knows he has been caught. Instead, he raises his blade. PFC Brazones fires 5 rounds, and the shots hit Thapa in the upper body. The knife falls from his hand and clatters to the floor, and Thapa goes down beside it, screaming in pain. What happens next on the body cam in its own way is as significant as the shooting itself. The officers step into the apartment, into a room that Chief Davis will later describe by saying, to describe the scene as bloody is an understatement. One of them, PFC Ryan Matthew Lacey, Nicholas's partner, moves directly to the baby. He picks up a 1-year-old child from the floor of a room where the child's grandfather has just murdered the child's mother and grandmother, lifts him into his arms, and carries him out through the doorway and into the hallway. The baby is crying and the police officer is trying to pacify him. The audio from the body cam captures an officer directing the first arriving responders with the kind of triage language that belongs to war zones, not suburban apartments.
The guy's out here. Here. Get his arms and get his legs and get him out. There's another victim on the mattress.
He has to explain to the paramedics which of the men on the ground is the suspect and which is the victim. Because in a room saturated with this much blood, both men look the same. Chhatra Thapa is pronounced dead at the scene. Binda Thapa and Mamta Thapa are rushed to a local hospital where both are pronounced dead on arrival. Santosh Kumar is barely breathing and he is transported with injuries so severe he will undergo more than 5 surgeries in the weeks that follow. And the baby, Mamta and Santosh's son, whose entire family has just been destroyed around him while he lay on the floor too young to understand any of it, is placed into the arms of a stranger in a police uniform and carried to safety. The sun has not yet risen on Fairfax County, but everything has gone down. The Margate Manor apartments sit on Persimmon Drive in Mantua, an unincorporated community in Fairfax County. This is suburban Virginia, 20 miles west of Washington, D.C. Good schools, safe neighborhoods, the kind of place where the most dramatic thing that happens on a weekday morning is someone scraping ice off their windshield. Mamta Thapa and Santosh Kumar moved to the United States from Nepal about 8 years ago. They were part of a growing Nepali diaspora in the DC metro area, a community that has expanded rapidly in the last decade, driven by the same forces that drive most immigration: opportunity, stability, the belief that things can be better somewhere else. Santosh worked at Campaign Mail and Data Inc., whereas Mamta was a licensed practical nurse. They had a baby boy, just over a year old, and they lived in a modest apartment, the one you saw in the body cam footage. What they were trying to do was immigrants simply trying to build a life. But in November 2025, Mamta's parents arrived from Nepal. Her father, Chhatra Bahadur Thapa, was originally from the Bilaka municipality in the Udayapur district, a rural area in eastern Nepal. Her mother, Binda Thapa, was 52. They had come to live with their daughter and son-in-law. And on November 12, 2025, Chhatra received his US permanent resident card, a green card, the much sought-after piece of document. After whatever journey it took to get to this point, whatever paperwork and interviews and waiting, a 54-year-old man from rural Nepal was now a legal permanent resident of the United States of America. But merely 3 months later, he would use a butcher's knife to kill his wife and daughter in his daughter's apartment on a normal snowy morning while his 1-year-old grandson watched from the floor. And the thing is, nobody knows why. I'm not saying that rhetorically. This is not a narrative device to create suspense. As of the date of this recording, no one, not the police, not the family, not the community, has been able to establish what triggered the attack. People speculate. Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis was explicit about this. Quote, "The only thing we do know with certainty is that he's had some challenges with mental health, but so do a lot of people, and it doesn't result in a slaughter like that." End quote. There were no prior calls for service at the address, no reports of domestic violence, no criminal history of any kind associated with Chhatra Thapa. Santosh told the police that there had been no argument the night before, no confrontation, no warning for what was about to go down.
And do we know what made Mamta's parents migrate from Nepal to the US following their kids? Maybe that is an insight into why this happened. Like, were there troubles back at home that they were also trying to start afresh from? Or was it just what happens in a lot of other families, that these parents have followed their kids to a different country to kind of settle down with them, support with them? What is it?
From whatever I have read, it is the latter. It is that natural following of your parents once you are settled and once you have the correct documentation, which increases odds of your parents getting a green card. And again, other family members that the police and journalists later talked to didn't quite see any clear motive for why this might have happened. We do know about the mental health issues. It is known that Chatra had been undergoing treatment for mental health challenges and had been taking medication for a prolonged period. Family sources shared with the Kathmandu Post that specific thing. But what kind of mental health challenges, what medication, whether he was still taking it in February, whether the relocation from rural Nepal to suburban Virginia exacerbated whatever he was dealing with, none of this has been made public. Now let me reconstruct from another POV what we know about the sequence of events inside that apartment based on police accounts and Santosh's own testimony. Because Santosh did not die. Santosh, despite the wounds, managed to give his testimony. It is approximately 5 a.m. on February 23rd. Santosh is outside and it has been snowing and he's clearing the snow off the car. This is a mundane act, the kind of things millions of people in the mid-Atlantic do on winter mornings without thinking twice about it. Scrape the windshield, brush the hood, think about whether the roads will be bad for the commute. And while he is outside, something happens inside the apartment. We do not know what starts it. There is no audio recording from the inside, no security camera, no witness to the first blow. But what we know is that Chhatra Thapa picks up the knife and begins attacking his daughter Mamta and his wife Binda. Santosh hears a commotion from inside. He calls 911 and then, rather than staying outside where he is safe, he goes back in. Santosh later described what he walked into. His words from an interview after the attack are haunting.
I still remember till last moment my wife was crying for the help. I can still hear those sounds. But somehow God wants to me here. Somehow I survived.
He killed all of us. That is Mamta Thapa's last recorded statement. Her final words are accusing her dad of killing everyone. She was a 33-year-old woman, a nurse, a mother, standing in the doorway of her own home, blood running from her head, telling her husband what her father had done. But despite her injuries, Mamta somehow made it out of the apartment, and that's where the police officers in the bodycam footage found her. She was wounded, bleeding, crossed the hallway, and as we told you, reached Ariana Edelman's door. She banged, she screamed, but Edelman didn't leave, but she did call 911, and that was the 911 call that the officers were responding to. Inside the apartment, Chhatra now turns on Santosh when Santosh went back in. He's using the same knife, the same 12-inch blade that has already killed his own daughter and his wife is now being driven into his son-in-law. Santosh is 35 years old. He's not a small man. He is a younger man. But this specific knife is not a kitchen knife. It is a tool designed to split bone. And Chhatra is relentless. By the time the police opened the door, Santosh was already stabbed multiple times. And in the middle of all of this, on the floor is that 1-year-old baby boy who does not understand what is happening, but he can see his grandmother, his father, his grandfather, all covered in blood. Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis held his first press conference at the Margate Manor Apartments on the day of the attack itself. He called the scene beyond imagination, gruesome and horrific. He later used a word that would become the defining descriptor, that Aishwarya used as well when she first saw the video, a bloodbath. He said that when the officers entered the apartment, quote, 2 lives had already been taken, and that he was convinced that if not for the actions of our police officer, heroic, decisive, disciplined actions, we would have had 2 more victims on our hands. The 2 additional victims he was referring to were Santosh and the baby boy. Now, when you watch the footage, you will see that the police did say drop the knife. They were panicking themselves, obviously. I mean, I can only imagine the adrenaline coursing through your body despite having trained for it multiple times in the police academy. But they did give warning signs. And when he was going towards to stab again, they fired shots. And in that moment, it is one more life being lost, and that's sad as a human. But the heroism displayed by the cops truly, in my opinion at least, did save the lives of Santosh and the baby. In this press conference, Davis then displayed a photograph of the knife, which was logged as evidence to the press. He was clear about its purpose. Quote, it's a cleaver with a 12-inch blade used for chopping bones. Meanwhile, the baby was taken into protective custody by Fairfax County's Victim Services Division, coordinating with the Child Protective Services. For the first days after February 23rd, nobody knew where the child would end up. His mother was dead. His grandmother was dead. His grandfather, who killed them, was dead. And his father was in the ICU fighting for his life. By early March, the child was placed with a cousin of Santosh's in Centerville, Virginia. Santosh's sister, Deeksha, flew from San Francisco to facilitate this. She posted photos on Facebook of the baby's reunion with the family. In one of the images, the child is smiling. He is too young to understand what happened, and perhaps that is the only mercy in the story. Santosh underwent more than 5 surgeries at the Innova Fairfax Hospital. A 12-inch knife through the body does not leave clean wounds, especially if it is a dao, because a dao cuts your bones and splits them. By early March, he had moved to a rehabilitation facility. Prabha Bhattarai, organizer of the community vigil, told reporters, quote, "He's getting better but still has a long way to go." The vigil was held on March 6 at the Margate Manor Apartments. Approximately 100 people attended. Leaders of Nepali organizations, relatives, neighbors, police officers. Chief Davis was also there. PFC Lacey, the officer who carried the baby out of the apartment, was there. Santosh's sister Deeksha was there. The Nepali community, a community that has been battered by violence in Northern Virginia in the last 2 years, gathered to mourn 2 more women who came to America seeking something better and found something unimaginably worse. The Non-Resident Nepali Association, Virginia chapter, launched a GoFundMe campaign. It raised more than $45,000 in under 2 weeks. The funds were designated for funeral and memorial expenses, Santosh's medical treatment and rehabilitation, care and counseling for the baby, along with legal and emergency needs. Mamta Thapa's funeral was delayed for weeks because her brother needed to travel from Nepal. When the Hindu memorial service was finally held, it was covered by the regional news network WSA9. And what that coverage revealed is perhaps the most ironical and extraordinary detail in this entire case. There weren't 2 caskets at the ceremony, but rather 3. Mamta's, Binda's, and Chhatra's. The man who killed them was being prayed over in the same service as the women he killed. And the person who helped lead the prayers for Chhatra's casket was Santosh. The man who was nearly butchered by him, the man whose wife was murdered, the man whose hands are still wrapped from the elbows down from the wounds inflicted by the person whose soul he is now praying for. Prabha Bhattarai, who was a family friend and the community vigil organizer, explained, quote, "The prayer does not allow you to separate anybody. Even though he did heinous things, we still have to let him go with peace and love. We don't want his next life to become a bad one." End quote.
Arun, I'm sorry. I don't know if this makes me sound like a shallow person not in touch with the idea of forgiving someone else's soul. But that sounds really, really heartbreaking and really horrible to me, especially considering there is a survivor from the attack who is at this prayer and who is at this ceremony. I understand religious significance. And so I think that can 100% be done. There can be a ceremony for him as well. But should it be separate from his victims? And should it be optional for the person that has survived the attack to not have to be there? 100%. This way, there's no way he can't. He wants to be there, I'm sure, to pray for his wife, to pray for his mother-in-law. But in doing that, he has to be there also praying for the man who almost killed him.
If that makes you shallow, I don't know what's a superlative of shallow, because I would honestly ditch the body in the worst garbage dump I could think of. But that's me. What might be consoling or might be a rationalization is, and the only way I see this being kind of okay, is that if he was the one that asked for it, if he consented to it, right? And if
that's what I was going to ask.
His own religious convictions propelled him to believe that the wife and mother-in-law would not receive peace if everything wasn't done per tradition. But if it wasn't that, if it was like external pressure that forced him to do this, I mean, it's heartbreaking. But regardless, it is ironical and in some ways reflective of the loving and beautiful nature of Nepali culture, a culture that
100%.
The few times I've gotten to experience it in Kathmandu, is they're the most welcoming and loving people. And I think to want peace even for the murderer in his next life, there is something salient about that, even though it's uncomfortable.
100%.
Now, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. An elephant that's been obscured, but at least in our DMs and in our research is very apparent to us. Because in Northern Virginia, there emerges a pattern. The Thapa case, you see, is not an isolated incident. It is the third tragedy to strike the Nepali community in Northern Virginia in under 2 years. And when you line them up, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Take, for example, Mamta Kafle Bhatt. On July 2024, she is a registered nurse at the UVA Health Prince William Medical Center who just disappears. Her last known contact is a video call with her mother in Nepal on July 29. She does not show up for work on August 1st or 2nd, and the hospital naturally requests a welfare check. Her husband, Naresh Bhatt, who's a 37-year-old former Fairfax County Police recruit and an ex-US Army Reserve, tells investigators that she's just visiting family in Texas or New York. The thing is, she has no family in either state. Her entire family lived in Nepal. On August 22nd, police arrested Naresh and they found pools of blood in the master bedroom and bathroom detectable only through the Blue Star technology. He had purchased 3 knives from a Walmart in Chantley on July 30th. Only one was found in the home. On his work laptop, investigators find a Google search. Quote, "How long does it take to get married after your spouse dies?" A friend later tells the police that Mamta had confided that she was in a domestically violent situation. The friend offered her resources, urged her to leave, but Mamta replied, "I want to give him one chance, hoping he could be a better father, better person. I did not want to put him in problem." End quote. Naresh has now been charged with murder, and Mamta's body has never been found. Their 1-year-old daughter has been reunited with Mamta's mother and brother who travelled from Nepal, and the trial is set for October 2026. But then there is the other case, June 5th, 2025. Police are responding to a welfare check at a residence on the Ilani Lane after a landlord calls concerned about his tenants. Officers enter the basement apartment and find 4 bodies. Santosh Pariyar, 38, Anju Shrestha, 36, their 8-year-old daughter and their 2-year-old son, all dead from gunshot wounds.
The officers arrived to find 38-year-old Santosh Pariyar, 36-year-old Anju Shrestha, a 2-year-old boy, and an 8-year-old girl, all dead from gunshot wounds.
A firearm is recovered at the scene, and the case is classified as a murder-suicide. The family had moved to the US from Nepal approximately 8 years ago on visitor visas. They had applied for asylum, and the application was still pending when they died. Neighbors described the children as full of life and the parents as quiet, kind, and loving. A GoFundMe was also started for them, which raised funds for a funeral conducted per Hindu tradition. And then after these 2 horrific cases in 2025, you have this case from February 23rd, 2026. 3 incidents under 2 years, all in Northern Virginia, all involving Nepali immigrant families, all resulting in the deaths of women and children, all leaving behind 1-year-old babies without their mothers. The Kathmandu Post ran an editorial in September 2024 titled, "As in Nepal, so in the US." It observed that Nepali women are vulnerable to intimate partner violence everywhere. In many cases, women give their partners several chances before speaking up. Nape, New York, a publication serving the Nepali diaspora, wrote that the incidents have, quote, sparked broader conversations within the Nepali diaspora about mental health and domestic challenges faced by immigrant families, citing cultural adjustment, financial struggles, and the stigma surrounding the mental health issues. My problem with the Chhatra case is this, that it just does not fit neatly into the domestic violence framework. There was no repeated history of violence, no prior incidents, no warning. The mental health angle is the only thread, and even that is flimsy. But what all 3 cases share is a broader reality about the immigrant experience that rarely gets discussed in the true crime genre. The invisible pressures of displacement, the disorientation of moving from a rural village in Nepal to a suburban apartment complex in Virginia. But these distortions and these problems that immigrants face rarely amount to a murder as gruesome as Chhatra Thapa did to his own family. The question of why still remains unanswered, but the body cam footage you've seen through this episode was released a few weeks later on March 19, 2026, approximately 25 days after the incident, in accordance with the Fairfax County Police Department's policy. Chief Kevin Davis held a press conference to present the footage and answer questions. He spoke about Officer Brazones with visible conviction. Quote, "I'm convinced the more I know about what happened on February 23rd, and certainly the more I watch that video, that if not for the actions of our police officer, heroic, decisive, disciplined actions, that we would have had 2 more victims on our hands." He credited the quality of FCPD's training for Brazone's response in what he described as an extraordinarily chaotic scene. Quote, his actions were in compliance with the law and our policy. He added, I feel confident saying to you that our young police officer not only saved lives, but he acted in compliance with the law and he acted certainly within our policy. End quote. Now, Aishwarya, you know this as to why he is going on and on about the police officer's actions, because when the trial will take place, the police officer is also going to be questioned whether his shooting was justified or not. And this is something that they take seriously in the States, especially given the I would say the last decade of rising tensions between civilians and police and wrongful shootings. Every shooting, every killing by the police is put under the lens. But in this specific case, I really think what Officer Brazones did was save lives.
Of course, I think from everything that we can see, it 100% looks like the officer saved lives. One can think they don't have a lot of background information into this case. Neither did the officer going in. All he could see was this man with a knife, blood everywhere, dead bodies all around.
Yeah, I wish body cam footage was a stipulated prerequisite in India.
Dash cam, body
know the
cam.
feasibility. Yeah. I don't know the feasibility, but I mean the way that exonerates both false victims and criminals and implicates wrongful doings by police officers and vindicates them when they're in the right. It just adds this layer of transparency between the citizenry and the police that I think just makes for a much tighter society.
100%. I think the police rests with so much power that in countries where these checks don't exist, even a country like the US where the checks do exist, there is still so much tension. South Asia is known for police brutality. Doesn't get talked about the same way in South Asia. It's not a term we use in South Asia the way it gets used in the US, but we all know the nature, the extent, the brutality of it in our own states, in our own cities, among our own police. So 100%, I wish we do make strides in that regard.
In fact, speaking of police brutality, there was an update in the Jayaraj and Benix case, which we covered 6 years ago. 6 years ago, this father and son duo was killed in custody by the police. And of course, there were no CCTV cameras or anything to ascertain it, but they did die in custody and their bodies, the autopsy clearly showed that
so brutal.
It was a brutal murder is what I will call it, because it was that, over nothing. Over, I think it was the timing of closing the shops or something like that.
It was COVID lockdown, yeah.
Yeah. And I think 9 of the police officers were found guilty. I don't know what actions have been taken, and we're going to revisit that case as a full-length episode with updates. But these mechanisms, as body cam, dash cam, all these other things, do add that layer of transparency that ensure that wrongful deaths and wrongful instances or rightful investigations don't take 6 years in the courts to have a result. Now, a court hearing is scheduled for late March 2026 to determine whether Brazones can return to active duty following the investigation. As of the release of the body cam footage, both the criminal and administrative investigations remain ongoing. But the chief's public confidence in his officer left little ambiguity about where the department stands on the issue of whether the shooting was justified or not. What I can tell you after all of this is what happened. A man came to America. He got his green card. 3 months later, on a snowy morning, he picked up a knife and destroyed the family that brought him here. There was no warning. There was no motive anyone had been able to identify. There was only a door that opened, a body cam that recorded, and a baby who was carried to safety by a man in uniform whose name most people will never know. Until the next time, stay safe, stay crazy, and stay desi.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.